Once again, Monsignor Don Fischer.
Okay. Thank you.
Here's our cheat sheet for the covenants in case we forget.
I just had a flash that I felt like a person on Oprah.
Oprah, oh.
Where'd that come from?
So the story seems pretty simple, like really when you think about it, right? God makes us, he loves us, right? He gives us a couple rules. We're human. We're going to screw it up. All we got to do is say we're sorry. I mean, really, like that's really what it all comes down to. And it just takes a lot, it just takes some time to just kind of figure that out, apparently. What's confusing all of this? Why has this become so confusing or so convoluted?
Gosh, that's a big one. Let me start with the simplicity of it. The simplicity of it is found in its intimacy. When you realize what this is about is you falling in love with a God who is made in the image of all men, all women. I mean, it's clear that, like, for example, when we say we're made in his image, and so when humans were made, they were made male and female. So I think that we have a problem sometimes with gender getting in the way. God is not a masculine figure versus a feminine figure. He's all of that. Everybody is in a way all of that. But when you look at the kind of simplicity of this, I think it's because the goal is simple, but the process is complicated. So if you realize that, let's just say you think, all right, I have been given certain gifts, and I want very much to be a part of God's plan for this world. So what do I have to do? Well, you believe in him. You believe the plan is real. We are building a kingdom of God, a place where people live according to their nature, and they're finding peace and goodness and wholeness. And then you have to say, okay, then what's my role? That's complicated. You know, I mean, it's really,
nice and play fair. It's just not that, it can't.
Yeah, just be good. And think about it. You're important, every single one of you. And your role is very important. And when you say, well, I'm only here to do the best I can to be sinless, you're not developing your personality, your personhood, your integrity. You're just existing to me. And that's the oversimplification. But the real complex nature of think of anybody that you spent a lifetime with, a partner. Is that easy? It's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of things you end up working through. If you imagine yourself as having a relationship with God like that, and you can spend time with him like that. I really screwed up today. I really did. I really can't believe this. Whatever, and not out of shame. Shame is the biggest thing that put the brakes on being your authentic self, because it tends to make you decide, what is my authentic self? And then you have to say, well, there's a good authentic self and a bad authentic self. Well, no, there's only an authentic self. And when you say, show me who you made me to be, it melts his heart, God's heart. Show me who I really am. I don't want to be what the world wants me to be. I don't want to be what culture wants me to be. I don't want what my parents wanted me to be. I don't want anything other than I want to be who you made me to be. Show me. And he will. But people don't always ask that. Then the other thing is, I think people have a fear of who they authentically are. And because they've been taught to be something else in the world, and you say, well, what if my authentic self isn't what the world sees, or even the church presents? Sometimes it seems to me the church presents an image of a certain piety. And please, whenever I criticize the church, know how much I love her and how much I want to please her. It's a major part of my psyche. And so I always feel like when I want to talk about the shadow, I said something to you just a little while ago I've never heard me say out loud in a thing. The church lies. I don't know when. Well, I'll tell you a story. It's a little emotional thing. But last week, I was watching some documentaries about the role of bishops and the church in terms of the crisis that we're in right now about molestation of children. And I don't know if you think of how it feels to be a priest and have that as an exposed problem that was not being dealt with and was swept under the rug. There's just an automatic feeling of shame. I'm ashamed of my church, and I feel that shame. Just like you would if your child does something really terrible or something, you feel, I somehow that's a part of me. So what he went on to say this, I told you that I listened to that thing, and the person who was giving the accusations about the fact that the bishops knew it and they never dealt with it right, and they also never got prosecuted for anything. And this man said it's up to a bishop to find out how his priests are functioning so that they're functioning faithfully and don't have some problem that's getting in the way of their being a minister of the gospel. And I'll tell you, I've been around 5 bishops, and only one has ever even gave me a hint that he was concerned about what we all did. I don't know how to say that. I'm not saying they aren't concerned, but they don't step in. We got, priests doing things we all roll our eyes at, and does the bishop ever do anything? Very seldom, unless it becomes a public issue. So my disappointment in all of that, I'm sorry this is making this too long, but I sat on my deck back in my house, and I just started crying, sobbing. I don't do that very often. And I thought, what's going on? I said, I have believed in my church, and I have been lied to. And the most dramatic way that happened is I was asked to be in a trial against the perpetrator of the abuse in Dallas. And I was told by the lawyer that the church was innocent. I really wasn't that directly engaged in overseeing this priest. I was vocation director, and I recommended him to the next step of evaluation. So that's what they were trying to do. But when I read the trial's response in the jurors, someone slipped it to me. I think I wasn't supposed to get it. After the whole trial was over, the jury can write out things that they felt about it. And it was so obvious that we were guilty. I mean, a letter, 4 pages, 2 years before this even broke, describing exactly the behavior of this priest to these young men, and it was ignored. And the bishop said, I didn't read it. And then he dumped it on the vicar general, I mean, anyway, I really want you to feel with me a love for the institutional church. Her rituals are spectacular. Her doctrine is beyond reproach. Her hierarchy and priests are not anything other than human beings, but they are caught in a system that gives them a sense of authority, give people a sense of authority, and they tend to feel they're not obligated by it. Isn't it fascinating that the moral corruption in the church in this one issue is now, I think, being manifested by an extremely moralistic litmus test for being a Catholic? If you believe in any kind of termination of a child, if you believe in any if you're homosexual, if you decide you can control birth with a pill better than this, intrinsically evil. There's nothing intrinsically evil. Everything. If it's intrinsically evil, then you don't need a conscience. Just don't do it. And that's I see so many people turning away from the church saying, I don't believe in this religion anymore. The religion is beautiful. The clergy have sometimes, all of us have failed. But if you look at history, we're not as bad as we used to be.
Yeah.
There's no comfort, but I mean, we don't have a lot of, children of popes becoming new popes or something like that. But nevertheless, I don't know.
But let's concentrate on that. Let's
All right.
concentrate on the beauty of the sacraments and the Eucharist and, the doctrine. I mean, this in and of itself is...
Well, I mean, every religion seeks to interpret the Bible, to understand it. The only thing about the Roman Catholic Church is it's been around for almost, for 2,000 years. And the book, is what we've paid attention to. The reflections on what Jesus taught and what the scriptures mean has been written and rewritten and written and rewritten by so many scholars for so long that it's fine-tuned. It's down to a more pure, I think, message of Jesus. It really is. Right now, the message of Jesus is very clear to me, and yet the church, as I know her now in her hierarchy, is opposed to what I believe the church should be. Someone who gives you a sense of value, dignity, worth. You have a voice. You have a authenticity, a uniqueness that you and only you and God know, and you have a right to consider that. And when you make decisions about things, why won't she do that? Why doesn't the church do that? And that's really the sadness of it. Without the sacraments, I don't think the church would have survived so many periods of time when it was corrupt, and that is simply because the Eucharist is the core ritual. And if you listen to what that ritual is, I love it, taking into consideration what I've been saying about the plan. I was saying, so here's God, he died for us, and he knows that nothing is more devastating to our well-being than a constant undercurrent of shame and guilt and fear. A religion that demands perfection is going to produce shame and fear and anger. So I'm saying, what is the thing that we really gather around as an experience of Catholic Church? It's Eucharist. It's 1 hour or plus, on a Sunday morning, we come together, everybody, let's say ideally, we'll take the ideal liturgy. It's changed so much from the pre-Vatican II, but people surrounding a priest, together creating Eucharist. Let me say it again. Together creating Eucharist. Eucharist is the presence, palpable presence of God in you, in me. It's Jesus in you, in me. It's the Spirit in you, in me. That's what we're there to affirm each other on. And we sing and we celebrate it and we create community. And you ask looking at any series of, not series, but any a Gallup poll on why do people go to church? You would think, well, for God and, sacraments. No, community.
People, relationships.
Community, relationship. I mean, you want to be around people like-minded, Why do we have country clubs? Why do we have special clubs? People like to be part of a group. And when you move around, like so many, I feel sorry in a way for so many people come to Dallas these days. I mean, I love that they come to Dallas. I love Dallas. But, they're coming from places where they have no history. And you want a sacrament from the church when you have no history of a parish here, it's pretty tough. You find the church is really kind of stingy about sacraments. Why? Well, we will make sure that you know what you're doing. I even had someone say, well, make it hard for people and then they'll really appreciate a sacrament. My God. It's like saying, go to a dinner party and beg for your food and you'll like it
Yeah.
better. I mean, right?
Right.
I mean, makes no sense. So anyway,
There's an idea you talk about, how like, and obviously we talked a lot about it in the first session, that we've evolved, our society's evolved, but
We
the
aren't-
church really hasn't.
okay, I can tell you, I'm 84. When I look at the world in the 40s, it doesn't look anything like this.
No.
The 50s, nothing like this, except people started being a little uncomfortable. It seemed like women in particular, started claiming their own, they're not just this housekeeper, and then you get to, I was about to read a thought.
60s. 60s.
Then it's that.
You're in seminary, so you were like blah 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 blah.
I think yes, 60s come after the 50s. Then things started to, and
Yeah,
that's when
so
I
it
go to
started to pop.
that's when I go to the seminary, and then 67 I'm ordained. But in that early 60s, when you could see that people were really saying, look, I don't necessarily believe in everything the government does. I don't necessarily believe what my parents taught me to do. I'm going to go off and find out who I am. And then we have this migration to places like California and all that kind of stuff. So, but that was the time the church said, we have to change the ministry that we have. It is not simply based in an unchangeable moral system. And I tell you, the issue with the church today with people is over its moral teachings, not over its doctrine or its sacraments. But they're saying, why are you telling us what to do? Why are you doing all this? And it's a good question. And so I think the 60s, where everybody was questioning, 70s, we tried a few different things, 80s, was disco.
What was that?
And, but I mean, we look at it, and it's just and then all of a sudden you have this information explosion
Right.
in the 80s. And now we have AI. And I mean, no, we're not, the children being born today, when I talk to little kids, I think they're really 10 and they're 2. I mean, they have something else. That's what evolution does. It changes our nature when we enter.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to see all that. And I want to see it flourish. But it's, how would I say that the church is behind the consciousness of the people, particularly the curia in Rome that makes all these regulations. And the Pope has gone into that and radically changed it. From a lifetime, once you get in, don't give anybody lifetime positions of power.
Anywhere.
Anyway, lifetime positions were there, and they would make the decisions in a committee of clergy of whether or not birth control with a pill or with, natural way of, abstinence. And the committees that I know that worked on that it was in 1973, I think, the document came out and said that using artificial birth control was a mortal sin in every case. All right.
Mortal.
That means separated from God. Oh, that's another thing we got to talk about. Sin in the Old Testament separated you from God. So what's different in the New Testament? I do not hold a single sin against you. It's another thing the church doesn't want to preach. You're forgiven. You're saints. I want to be forgiven. I want to feel your love that overpowers my shame, my anger, my fear. I want to feel good about myself. He says, well, what are you not feeling good about? I don't do enough. I'm not good enough. He looks at you and says, didn't you hear what I said? Sin is not a separation from me. It's a sign that you need to grow and change in certain areas. Deal with it that way. Stop laying on yourself shame and guilt.
That's what's actually separating you, right? It's
Right.
the shame and the
Yeah.
fear that's...
And then when I think about how the sacrament of confession was taught in the 50s and 40s, anything you did, how minor. And I listen to confessions. Well, let me tell you about the confession. I mean, you get everyone in there who is just, I turned the light on the wrong way. I didn't clean the kitchen like I should have. It draws anyone who is caught up in a sense of I'm not what I should be, I'm not what I should be. They come to confession, encouraged to do so with human weaknesses. The doctrine of confession is it is only necessary if you have committed a mortal sin. But the church thought, well, it's a great devotion. You know, you just go and it assures you that God forgives you. Okay, that's like, go back to the dinner party thing. You know, that's like saying, what you need to do is anybody that's forgiven you, go back and check with them on a regular basis. Do you still forgive me? 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 Am I still okay? No, you're okay. If you choose a mortal sin, you've chosen something so radically different than what God wants you to be. There's a break in that communication is stopped. That needs a sacrament. Not to convince God to forgive you, but to convince you that you're forgiven. Confession is a statement of God's forgiveness to you, and the priest states, in the name of Jesus, God, I absolve you from all of your sins. Well, think about dropping sin as a major, it's not saying then you can do anything you want. That's what everybody else would say. Like when I talk to my priest friends, and I say, you got to tell them they're forgiven. Yeah, and then they'll just do anything. If you give people the freedom to say you make your own moral decisions and you don't need to worry about God holding anything against you, they will look at you and just say you're out of your mind.
But I mean, that's what we were talking about, I think, in the first half, is like, if you've done the work, if you've developed wisdom and discernment, you'll already know. You'll
That's
have
it.
that.
Well, that the plan is, God says, I will give you all you need to guide your life toward me if you allow me to. Can you allow me to? Because I love that idea. Well, I'm not worthy. Well, that's not the issue. I made you worthy. I made you a beautiful creation. When I look at you, I don't see your sin. I see the beautiful figure that you are. And if you could just try to imagine any feeling that you have for another being, it's pure love, nothing but pure love. That's God's constant feeling toward you throughout everything. Even when you're committing mortal sin, he is there loving you, praying for you. Who does he pray to? That's right. God would longing to give you grace to be able for you to find the dignity and the worth that you have. Anyway, I'm getting wound up a little bit, but
and I think it's great. It's in a lot of business coaching and personal coaching, there's this idea of like, well, what could you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And I wonder, how would we live our lives if we just truly understood we're unconditionally loved? Like, what would that change?
Good point. Well, and the other thing that I want to say, and this is true, when you tell people you can't do these things, and if you're afraid, if you tell them they can, they'll do it. Well, when you tell them you can't, they do it.
Of course.
So, I mean, it's sort of like,
don't push the red button.
Yeah, you ask a young person today about dating and what's allowed in dating, and it ain't what was allowed in the 40s. And so, and you say, well, these kids are all immoral. Are they?
Yeah.
Was it really looking at the moral teachings we had as adolescents in the 40s and 50s? You might as well just wrap your body in cellophane and just said, I'm not going to get near anything that's sexual. And
there's one thing. There's one thing you kind of touched on a little bit that I just want to get clear is what the Holy Father's doing and starting to really institute Vatican II. The people who are getting kind of upset about it, the doctrine's not changing.
No, we haven't changed any doctrine. We haven't changed any of the sacraments in terms of, here's what I can say. We've changed the nature of the relationship between the hierarchy and you, me, everyone. We're trying to move it out of an older form where the hierarchy felt obligated to tell people who didn't have a conscience developed enough yet what is right and wrong. And so it was a binary world, hierarchy telling those under them that these are the rules, regulations, keep them. In the Old Testament, you see the Israelites who are struggling with their relationship with God. Look, we want to please you, but we don't know how, so just give us a set of rules and regulations. We'll follow them to the letter, and we've got it, you know. And where our heart is doesn't make any difference. All right, so that's what's, you know, the problem right now. So what I see is there's a problem between the church's role as three roles the church has: teach, rule, sanctify. Sanctify is all the sacraments. I was ordained, I tell you, to be told as a 27-year-old, you have the power to make Christ present in a room that's a church or anywhere you are, was mind-boggling to me. The Vatican Council comes along, you know, and explains to me that that is a dignity that you, the priest, has, a power, but it's also your power. You can make God manifest wherever you are. So it's like this priesthood of the faithful is called. Like the people have been elevated to the top of the pyramid, laity, and then the hierarchy is on the bottom. Right. They're servants.
Yeah.
Well, that's a new job description, folks. You know, I mean, the dear.
When you did it, it was a sweet gig.
Yeah. Dear Curia, you're all told to shift your direction. Will you listen to what people are going through because of the moral restrictions you put on them? And so the Pope wanted every country in the world to send people to him who are family members. This is part of his work as a Pope. And said, tell me what it's like. Tell me what the regulations of the church on your marriage, what your family. Is it helpful? Is it not?
The laity, yes.
The laity. So Cardinal Farrell's a friend of mine, and he was telling a story that I did name that. I was name dropping. It's okay. But anyway,
we're amongst friends.
He said one day the Pope himself did all these interviews, not a committee. You know, he did it, and so he would I think he had like 5 or 6 people come from each country, and he went to one. He said, and he walked in, and it was all clergy, and they're smiling, and he said, "Where the laity?" They said, "Oh, well, we asked them, and we're going to tell you what they said." He said, "I'm not listening," and he walked out.
Yeah.
Send me some people that are living the life you are asking them to live, and let you hear what I hear from their heart and from their soul. I'm hearing people crying out, where do I go for help? I don't know where to go, you know? And yeah, well, go ahead.
Yeah, and we hear a lot of older folks who, you know, say, I've left the church, but not God. I still like you. I still love the church, but I just can't. I can't do it. And then we're starting to also kind of see this epidemic of anxiety and fear in the younger generations. And I'm wondering if there's a correlation between this institution, like a lot of institutions today just seem to be crumbling and falling apart.
Well, do
you think there's a connection there between those two?
Yes. Well, let me say something. If you're looking at the world today and saying this is horrible, this is awful, and there's a lot of awful things about it, please understand, evil does its most devastating work when it's undercover and not out on the table. I've never seen a time when we've looked at almost every institution, everything, and found it corrupt, you know, and people charging people just because they can and get away with it. All that kind of immorality, I'll call you, not people getting into a work that makes something for them at the cost of the people. That's what's insane. It's everywhere, it seems, and that means it's got to change. It's got to change. So I'm hopeful about the fact that everything looks kind of bleak you know. But the thing that is curious to me in the church role is what I'm seeing in the church is we've turned up a very big corruption in the hierarchy, hiding pedophiles, lying about it. I've seen Catholics just fall apart when that happened. I have a brother who it just so shattered him because he had such a high level of responsibility to do what the church wants them to do and to be faithful to everything, you know. And here they are doing all that. So anyway, it's changing. And the people that are changing the church are the people who are not in the church right now. The people that are looking for something more. And when they find it, and they are finding it in different places, but all I can say is, in a period of time where there's so much conflict and struggle, just know that we are going on hyper speed in terms of transformation. That's all.
Absolutely.
I mean, when people say everything is so bad, and I say no, it is so bad because it needs to be so changed, and it will be so much better when it's changed.
Do you think we need to take a little responsibility, though, and maybe manage our expectations of what we expect out of church, though?
It's a good point. I mean, we're human and all that, but you know, when something is kind of systemic in the whole operation, like we, the clergy, are not responsible for whether people understand what we're saying, we're the ones who tell them what to do, that's a systemic problem. And it keeps them from, you know, compassion, empathy. I would say to you, the majority of priests are compassionate, understanding, and loving people. And the priesthood is less likely to get caught up in the structure problems when you separate from the people. In other words, a bishop sits in a room and makes a decision for the diocese, listening to all, you know, everything, and he has to make that decision based on all kinds of things, whatever. Well, he might be a little less aware of what that effect, what is changing, what that effect will be on people. So that's why, to me, Christianity and the role of the priesthood happens right here. It's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
Me talking to you as a representative of an institution, and I want to tell you things. I don't want to tell you that you're not good enough. I don't want to tell you that you're wrong. I want to tell you that you're valuable, you're loved, and you have dignity. And that's all I want. And that's what the church needs. You know,
what do you think of the symptom of the size of churches that we're looking at, though, now? I mean, it's like insane.
Dallas, Texas has more people in one parish than the entire diocese of Baton Rouge has in the diocese. It's 25,000, 30,000 members in parishes, one priest, two priests if you're lucky, three maybe. When I was growing up, the parishes were a lot of them. They were never very big. I mean, the buildings that we're building today are going to be so obsolete in the future when I believe and I pray that men who are not desiring a celibate life but a married life can be priests. I believe it's happening. I believe it will happen. We'll have more priests than we know what to do with in that case. I mean, that's the way it was in the 50s. We had more priests than we knew what to do with. And the parishes were plentiful, and you'd have 4 and 5 priests in a parish. And there was a priest to person. That's where it happens. You know, priest to a small congregation, not hierarchy in Rome to the universal church. That gets riskier, you know. But anyway, back to what I'm hopeful for in the church, that we will have more priests. The Pope has tried to pass this through his advisors. He has absolutely the right to make his own decisions, but it's not the nature of the collegiality that the church, we should listen to each other, make decisions together, and this decision should be made together. Women, there is the diaconate allows a man to preach, at Mass, and the Pope wants to bring back the diaconate. It was included women. In the past, we have a tradition of that. So I can see not necessarily ordination to the priesthood in my future, but ordination for women is going to, I see happening much more sooner than later. They can preach, and they're good at preaching, and they're better than most of us men.
Sure,
I think.
absolutely.
I mean, they have much more empathy, and it would be such a gift to the church to have more of a feminine quality. You look at all the things I'm describing to you as what the church seems to be missing: compassion, empathy, building people up. Women, you do it so well. Men, we do it, we're more like controlling things. And so it's so clear to me that we have a really dilemma of an over-masculine church.
So this is a big shift. This is moving a lot of cheese, as they say, and it's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and I think it has. I think it has been. This is a very, very hot topic. Do you think that we're going to just see people sort of shift in church, or do you think we're looking at maybe another split?
Good question. Here's the deal, I think. When the liturgy changed, it was probably the most dramatic thing that impacted people with ideas that came up later in other documents, but the liturgy was changed so radically from a private spiritual experience sitting in a room. The person who was celebrating this sacrament was facing away and was not looking at the people, and he wasn't speaking loud enough for them to hear. An awesome mystical experience of a room filled with people in total silence. My parents always had to take turn they couldn't go together because of having children. You didn't have children crying. It was a mystical, quiet thing. Anyway, that is what the church wanted to change. It's not a private. Your relationship with God is not private. It's not you and God working things out and you doing everything He wants you to do and then you being awarded at the end a medal. Here's your ticket to heaven. No, it's all about relationships and community. So what happens is the liturgy changed, and all of a sudden, it's not that mystical quiet. It's, I'll tell you, sometimes it was like when I went to one parish, I remember saying, well, the style of this particular priest before me was sort of like, he kind of had it was a cross between a ballpark and a theater, And what I was saying is that to do the liturgy well, it takes everyone's participation and a real sense of what you're doing. But it's communal. Those who are opposed to that, particularly the liturgy, asked the Holy Father, John Paul II, if he would allow them, because it was so dramatic a change, can we use the old rite? And he said yes. Big mistake. I shouldn't say. It was compassionate to elderly. But what it did, it continued a celebration of liturgy that is clearly a private event between you and God, more than it's communal. We never sang. We had a choir in the 50s and things like that. So you didn't sing. You didn't respond to the priest. Now and they say, well, the music is off. When my conservative brothers and sisters, I kind of feel the music is not sacred enough. The place is not sacred enough. People aren't sacred enough. And when you see what sacred looks like, it's a quiet, head bent, veil over women, just kind of listen, and I'm not, please, they're so sincere and they want so much to do what they do, and they're well-intentioned, but they're filled with such animosity toward the council. They feel it's the most evil thing that's ever happened to the Catholic Church. And the church has tried to change in the past, but there was a pope, like Pope Pius X. He was so against anything modern. The church's way of life that we are asking you to live will never change. Well, that just flies in the face of pretty much everything human nature tells us about ourselves. So I would say that the thing that is going to happen, well, let me get it. He let that go, and then it's been developing and developing and getting more and more people engaged in it. That is mass, the old right. And then the next thing that happens is they start their own churches, not just, and so Francis looked at it and said, the last two popes allowed this to happen, and I'm going to say you can't do it anymore. And they just saw that as a horrific slap in the face. Like, you're not paying attention to what we need. We need the liturgy in its oldest form. Well, if it was just a matter of the form and the spirit was the same, and the end is certainly the same, but it's not what people want now. It's not what they need. And so anyway, what happened is we now have a very small, very loud, very outspoken group of people who say the Vatican Council is wrong. And our way of celebrating its wrongness is to go back to the old rite. Then the Holy Father said, well, this isn't the church. We don't have two rites and things like that. So I think the number of those people is small compared to it's guessed to be about 1% of Catholics are there. But maybe it's much bigger than that. But the point is, the thing that will happen, I think, is they have to make a choice as to whether or not the church in its formed by the Vatican Council, is that the church they want or do they not? And if they don't, there's a society that was built or that was created in France. It's a Bishop Lefebvre, I think was his name. But when the council happened, he said, it's all heresy. It's not, we're going to have our own church. We're going to create our own. We have our own bishops, our own seminaries. And that has grown and grown and grown in some spaces. Well, out of the blue, I was watching the news, and there was an article or news about a church being built in the middle of Kansas called Immaculata. Anybody know what that, anybody hear it then? Anyway, this church is like a major cathedral, mega church. Nobody's living around much, but I mean, it's in the country. Guess who built it? The Pius X Society. They're big in Europe in certain ways, but now they've got their own church, not just a little church, but a big church. And I think what they're going to do, people will be drawn to that and will feel that they're following God's will. That's what I think will happen. But I pray for conversion. And you know what's going to convert people more than anything? Is stop judging and stop criticizing people who think differently than we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think...
when you get a radical liberal and conservative Catholic together, there isn't any ground even they can meet on because they're so completely different. You got to somehow have a core that you both agree on before you can do what you have to do.
Yeah, I think the theme has definitely been relationships and getting over our own fear and anxieties of one another and ourselves.
Yeah.
There seems like, again, going back to the youth, I think there's my kids are 23 and 21, and they both suffer from anxiety, and it's bad. It can be crippling. My daughter sometimes can't go to the grocery store, and how can this help? How does this lack? How do you see this lack of community? Because the relationships, the community, everything that's good about this could help. It could really become impactful.
Yes, and what is so sad is the high rate of suicide in adolescent girls, especially in boys. It's terrifying. Why would a young boy or girl not feel like they wanted to live in the world that they see around them? What's missing? And there are three things that they're missing. They don't have a sense that this world is in a process, it's in the hands of a loving creator, and that we're moving in a direction that will absolutely attain the goals that God sets out. In other words, they don't have a way of categorizing all that's going on in the world, saying, every time now there's a war, like we've had it, like let's just take the Israel situation. There's so many people look at that and say, this is insane. 40,000 people have been killed because of what 1,000 did to another. That's insanity. Nobody really thinks that's the way to do that. And it's that kind of change that I see in the world that's really so important. But you have to have kind of a perspective. 14, 13, 12-year-olds, they don't know what the Second World War was like, the First World War, how devastating the Civil War was. They don't know about the 60s. If you just, the church is, the world goes into conflict and then it grows. It goes into conflict and it grows. And if you don't say, well, the world is getting better, maybe you don't want to live. I've heard people say, I don't want to bring children into the world because it's a world that's going to be, well, first of all, we'll all be burned to death by climate change. Then we'll, and it's like, these are all things we're going to get, we have a pretty good survival rate when things go bad in our history.
Yeah.
And they're worse then and now. Why do we get depressed? That's that. The other is, I don't think they have a sense that they are valued, because social media has a real negative effect on kids on that. Something's put out there as a goal that is unattainable,
Yeah, it's amazing how something that was designed to help us communicate with one another has actually driven us so far apart.
It's been used in a way to manipulate. And the thing that I think is really scary about news and everything like that now is 90% of what you're going to hear is negative, because people pay attention to negative news much more than they do positive news. So you're getting negative, information about the world consistently. You're afraid there's nothing really happening here that makes any sense, that it's going to get better. Probably won't be. I don't fit in my culture because I have this ideal that I'm supposed to have. And then, I'm anxious and I'm unhappy and I act out with my parents, with friends, and then you feel obligated, you feel separated from them. It's the perfect storm. And what would heal it? Someone looking at that person and convincing them that they're loved, and they're beautiful, and that everything's going to be all right. And I tell you, when I say this, I mean it deeply. All you need to do is intend that. If you just get up in the morning and intend that any young person considering separation from life as an option, I want them not to do that. You have no idea how powerful that is, that intention. It's, when Jesus walked along and healed people, and I don't know how many people he healed, but you look up in the, some direct, how many healings did Jesus do? Well, they'll list the ones, and they say he did 12, or something.
Right.
No, he did hundreds, thousands, I think.
They were lined up.
Yeah, and so when I'm thinking about that, what was it that he had that made it happen? An unbelievable amount of understanding and compassion and love for the person that was in trouble, in pain, who lost a son, who is covered with the disease. The compassion and the intention to heal was so strong in him, and he was so purely divine that it healed them. Bang. The same thing happens in our life today when you have that intention. It just doesn't happen that dramatically. And so think about, you have a value in changing the world. If you don't think you can change the world by your actions, you don't fully understand how the world works in terms of the plan of God, because that's what he wants.
And on that, to leave everybody on a positive note, what is your vision or your view of God's plan, our destiny, and our place in it?
That's really a tough one in a way. Well, I believe in the goodness of everyone. I believe the world is moving in the right direction by exposing what is evil. I believe that when people see evil for what it is, like war is evil, I think, they're more conscious of that today than ever. I mean, can you imagine today us going around with flags and saying, we just dropped 2 bombs on innocent people in Japan. We won, we won, we won. Now, I'm not saying that. I mean, whenever you talk about military, you have to be careful. But I mean, the people that did all that felt that that's the only way to stop it. And maybe that was the only way then to stop it. But think of the insanity of stopping a war that was created by somebody who wanted more territory for its richness, leading to that. I mean, I don't know how people would feel like, or I don't know if you want to go and fight a war that you don't even believe in, and that's, of course, Vietnam and things. But that's what I have hope in. People are changing, and people are looking at things, and they're saying, this doesn't make any sense. 40,000 young people, old people, children in this country been attacked by Israel. The Israelites, God's people, and to do that out of some kind of mentality where they couldn't possibly find another way to solve that dilemma. If you feel like I feel that that's insane, we're all moving in the right. That's where my hope is, that we're seeing things. I read this once, I don't know if it's true, but it's interesting, about sex outside of marriage or something. And then, and it was like, there's been supposedly, it's like people don't think that much about doing that these days. And I'm talking about dating people, that's what I'm talking about. And they said that, I don't know how they know the statistic, but once people felt they could do that anytime they wanted, they just don't want to do it anymore. But I mean,
there's no danger of getting caught.
But, it's sort of like, all right, there's something you can't eat, chocolate. And then you start eating a lot of chocolate, and you go, that's enough chocolate, I mean, that's kind of silly, but anyway. You got me revved up. I
guess
just
so.
bouncing around.
Yeah, I'm
here
trying
in
to
my head.
steer you into this other direction, but you keep going to war on me.
I know, sorry.
So basically, I kind of just want to make the point that just as much as you have to open yourself and accept God's love, you also have to give yourself the authority to make the change. You have to be able to believe that we are all a part of something to build this kingdom together.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's it. And it's in our midst. It's already here. In this world, it's already here. That's Jesus said, it's already here and it's coming. So the seeds of it are here and it's working in certain ways. But when everybody does it, when everybody sees its value, we're going to enter into a world that's so beautiful and so wonderful. And, I always thought, it's true, the scripture says God will come back at the end of the time and destroy all evil people. That's true. But the teaching in the Catholic Church that I've read, it's yes, anyone who chooses not to live, not to accept, not to allow God to forgive them, God will not force, they will not be in the kingdom of God, okay? Yeah. But the fact that there's this, how would I say it? There's a way in which I just get excited about thinking about a world without evil. I'm sorry. Wouldn't it be that? Think of it. No jealousy, no envy, no competition. Look at the 10 Commandments. All of those things everybody would be doing.
The freedom.
Nobody lies anymore. Wouldn't that be interesting? Try that as a discipline. Try not lying. It's really hard. and I include, at least as a guide for me, is don't exaggerate, baby.
Yeah.
There was not 100,000 people at your rally.
Oh, well, that's
Yeah. Sorry. That's dangerous. But but don't exaggerate it. Just tell the truth. Think of that. Think of any relationships you had that you fear that if you told the truth, it would not be valuable. Well, everything does not need to be told to everybody about everything you've done or whatever. But the point is, the integrity that you have when you're in dialogue is got to be truthful. I mean, in other words, if you feel some way, let somebody know. It's hard. That's the hardest thing in the world for me.
Absolutely.
Somebody wants me to do something and I really want to help them, and what they want I don't think is good for them, and I'm going to tell them you can't have it, or that's hard, And I mean, not in dramatic cases, but so anyway, it's you just drew a lot of stuff out of me. I'm exhausted.
Well, we're out of time, so thank you for the time. Do you want to close with a prayer?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is hopefully coming straight from God, I hope. Father, your goodness, your greatness, your awesomeness is in your love for us. What I beg you to give to each of us, to the world today, is a sense of all that you see in us. More than anything else, enter into each of our souls and into our hearts and be that resonating thing, so that we don't think we have to be these wonderful people. We have to allow you to be working through us wonderful work, miraculous work, transforming work. Bless each and every person here with the gift of your Spirit. Whatever is painful, whatever is difficult in them, in their life, free them from it and give us grace. And may Almighty God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit descend upon you and remain with you forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, Monsignor.
Yahoo! All right.